Hark! It's an 87th Precinct podcast. This is the only podcast in the world dedicated to Ed McBain's seminal series of police procedurals, which began in 1956 with Cop Hater and ended in 2005 with Fiddlers. There were 55 books in the series, and today's podcast looks at book number 44, Kiss. My name is Paul Abbott, and to review this book I'm joined, remotely again, by Mr. Stephen Royston.
Hello.
And Mr. Morgan Brown.
Hello there.
And before we get going, I suppose it's a good opportunity to say hello to our listeners in the States, and especially anyone who's in any of the states that have got the terrible weather conditions that are going on top of everything else. I know we've got listeners in the States, and I know we've got listeners in Texas, so I hope you're all safe and well, and you've got the terrible weather conditions, but you also have terrible senators as well. So, I hope all of those things improve soon for you anyway. Right, you can also look us up on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, or email us if you want, using hark87podcast@gmail.com. If you want to ask us a question, or send us a comment, or whatever. And you can keep sharing and rating and reviewing. We'd like that very much. But we're going to wind the clock back to 1992, which is 29 years ago, which seems very strange. And we'll see what's going on before we get stuck into Kiss. Yeah, 29 years ago is 1992. It seems odd.
Yeah.
Anything about 1992 stand out for you, fellas?
I'm not really sure. 1992, just at high school, high schooling away, I suppose.
Yeah, oblivious to what turns out lots and lots of stuff going on, really.
Yeah.
So I've got quite a lot of stuff to chat through, so I'll go quickly through some things from 1992. It's an Olympic year, so Olympics happen.
Oh, yeah.
We've got, I think this is relevant to Kiss, we've got the conviction of the mafia boss, John Gotti, who's convicted of murder and racketeering in New York. He's a New York mafia crime boss. Just keep that in mind for the fact that when we're discussing Kiss, it's the first, I think, 87th Precinct book to feature a mafia character. I think that's probably right, isn't it? I don't think we've had any before, have we?
I think so.
Yeah. No, I can't think of one.
I think we've had mentions in the books about, if you're Italian American, people think you're in the mafia type thing, but this is the first one that actually, and I think that might be because John Gotti has been in the news maybe while McBain was writing it.
Yeah, and I suspect Evan Hunter purposely didn't bother with Italian American crimes. He wouldn't be interested, would he? Really?
No. I think it is his thing without being an American rather than an Italian American, and that mafia attachment to that he was always trying to keep away from.
Yeah.
But yeah, what else is going on in 1992? Loads of IRA bombings, which just seemed to be a matter of daily life, sadly, in those days.
Mm-hmm.
What else have we got? We've got the formal declaration of the end of the Cold War in February. We've got the Maastricht Treaty being signed, which is solidifying the European Union, which we're still dealing with now. We've got a general election in the United Kingdom where John Major wins again. So four in a row for the Conservatives. What else have we got? We've got riots in Los Angeles after the acquittal of the officers in the Rodney King case from the year before, I think. We've got riots in the UK, which is essentially in several working class places in the north and the south. It's poverty, it's housing, it's police treatment of things. So it's a bit of a tinderbox. What else do we have? Oh, something fun. We've got Black Wednesday, which I barely understand because it's all about economics, but is essentially when the government in the UK had to suspend trading on the pound and withdraw it from the exchange rate mechanism or something.
Yeah, there was a run on the pound.
Essentially, yeah. But I tell you where you could listen. If you want to hear anyone talking about that and find out more about it, there's an episode of the very, very good Simpsons and Modern History podcast called Retrospecticus. Have done one thing. They split half the show about something that happened at the time a Simpsons episode came out and half the time about a Simpsons episode. And they've just done one about Black Wednesday. So look up Retrospecticus, which explains it much better than I ever could. What else have we got on here? We have Bill Clinton defeats George Bush and Ross Perot. So that's something that happens in America. What else happens? Oh, Mortal Kombat is released.
Now, the really important stuff.
Yeah, and, well, its lasting legacy is there's a new Mortal Kombat film coming out this year.
Yeah, a new trailer just dropped, didn't it?
Yeah.
Wild.
And they've given up any pretense of not just having ludicrous violence in it. So it's... and if they've got all the violence in the trailer, goodness knows what's going to be in the film. What else have we got? Oh, important stuff like Pope John Paul II issuing an apology for the Inquisition against Galileo. So that happens in 1992.
Sure he's made up about that apology, wasn't he?
Yeah, 400 years too late, but better late than never. What else have we got? It's nuts, isn't it?
Just a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, we've got... This is one of my favourite things. I've always loved this. It's John Major, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, started a thing called the Cones Hotline.
Oh, he did, yeah.
This is our infrastructure story for this episode, which was essentially putting the onus on members of the public to ring up a phone number if they saw cones on a motorway that should have been taken away or something. Essentially that, wasn't it?
Yeah, if you saw cones without any works going on, you had to phone this number.
And basically nobody did. And it was just a huge waste of government money for a thing that nobody needed. So
luckily, that never happens these days. Huge waste of government money on things that no one needs.
No, indeed. No. Well, yeah.
Thank goodness those days are behind us.
Whilst it was a bit of a waste of money, I don't remember the Cones Hotline costing £22 billion, but...
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. We scaled it up now to the point where you can't really comprehend it anymore. Yeah. Anyway, we'll finish the review of 1992 with Dan Quayle, if you remember Dan Quayle.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Correcting the spelling of someone at a spelling bee that he was visiting. He corrected the spelling of someone's potato. He put an E on the end of it. It's like you're being filmed, everyone's watching you, and you just... Oh, it's so embarrassing.
Potato. Classic. That's very funny, that.
It is. It's the silly things that have stuck in my mind, like the Cones Hotline and Dan Quayle, but, I don't remember at the time hearing about John Paul II forgiving Galileo. Oh, no. So actually, to finish off, that's the year that the Queen described as an annus horribilis.
Oh, yeah.
Because basically lots of things went wrong in the royal family.
Didn't they have the fire at Windsor Castle? Was that year?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, fire at Windsor Castle, Charles and Di splitting up.
Yeah.
And Andrew and Fergie splitting up. And,
it's been an annus horribilis. She probably said that, didn't she?
It's like she's here.
Uncanny.
Yeah, that was very good. You can get a job on Spitting Image.
Yeah.
No, so goodness knows how she'll describe any year since then. It's not really got much better, has it? Yeah. Right. On to McBain world. Anyway, because I've got quite a lot here. Because, some years we've had recently, particularly with his illness and that, he's not done that much. But this year, 1992, we've not just got Kiss. He's also puts out a Matthew Hope novel called Mary Mary. And he puts out a novel called Scimitar, published under the name John Abbott. And it was another attempt to use a pseudonym that I think he'd used a couple of times for some short stories that nobody would really know about. And this is the only book published under John Abbott, and nobody knew it was him for a while. Anyway, the reason they did eventually learn that it was him is because it concerned a sarin attack. So the sarin gas, deadly gas, this book, Scimitar. And a couple of years later, there was the gas attacks on the Japanese underground.
Oh, yeah.
Which was sarin. And some people believed that it was a copycat crime based on this book.
Yikes.
But the book actually just contains a very fictitious formula, an authentic sounding one. So he'd worked with a chemist to come up with a formula for making sarin that wasn't quite the formula for making sarin to put into his book. Mm-hmm. But yeah, these people in Japan who were part of a doomsday cult, it turns out, it was coincidence, but there was enough that the attention was turned on this book. That's sort of one way to have your pseudonym debunked.
Yeah, not necessarily the reason that you'd want for your book to gather attention, is it? But
No, not at all. But yeah, it's since been republished as under the McBain name, like so many of those pseudonymous ones have anyway. What else? Oh, but yeah, actually, I found a review of Scimitar by Newgate Calendar.
Hey.
He's still kicking out.
He doesn't know that it's Evan Hunter, Ed McBain, does he, you see, when he's reviewing it? And it starts with Scimitar. He knows it's a pseudonym. He says Scimitar by the pseudonymous John Abbott displays a fine sense of professionalism. Mr. Abbott can write, however, and it's quite a good review from Newgate Calendar. So he knows it's a pseudonym, but I suspect he didn't know it was a pseudonym for Ed McBain.
Oh.
Otherwise, he would have surely given him a much worse review.
I suspect he would have put the boot in a bit, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, there's Newgate Calendar. He still pops up now and again.
Wow.
And what else have we got? Right. So we've got TV stuff as well. So we've got the Czech adaptation of Shotgun, Brokovnic. We've got the episode of Columbo called No Time to Die, which is the one that's based on the wedding story, I believe. And we also have episode 1 of My Town, which is the second block of Japanese adaptations of the 87th Precinct story. The ones that feature Ken Watanabe as Goro Morita, who is the Corella character. And I would love to see these.
Yeah.
Because they made loads of them. So the first one they adapt, and that comes out in 1992, is Killer's Wedge. I mean, Killer's Wedge has been adapted loads of times. It's one of the most adapted of all of the stories. But I don't know whether they adapted it strictly to the book with both the plots in it, because actually Corella obviously doesn't feature much in Killer's Wedge.
Oh, yeah.
So we don't know. But it's so difficult to find anything out about these Japanese adaptations. It was on the 13th of October 1992. It's on NTV, Nippon TV, script by Toshio Kamata. But yeah, that's the start of a whole run of another run of Japanese McBain things. So that's good.
Sure is.
And I've got even more stuff because I found an article from 1992, and it's called. The article is called "Even if he does say so himself, McBain's the best at what he does." As self-effacing as always.
Indeed.
But it's a review, or it's an interview in the Hartford Courant, which is obviously a local paper in Connecticut. And obviously it mentions that he's 65 years old. And I've just highlighted a couple of bits in here. Hunter, who looks a bit like an in-shape Walter Matthau. Which I sort of get. I think he's a bit more handsome than, no disrespect to Walter Matthau, but I think Hunter wore at the age of 65 a bit better. But yeah, talks with a tough guy New York accent, it says. 5 days a week, Hunter goes to work from about 10 a.m. until 5 or 6 p.m. at the computer in his office, which is a studio just a few dozen feet from his house, which is up near Silvermine River in Norwalk, Connecticut. And it mentions this after pouring a cup of virile coffee, so strong you can imagine the cops of the 87th Precinct subsisting on such a brew. It's a very descriptive little review type thing with stuff like that. But it does end with, and this is what's relevant to sort of the mood of the books, it says, "I happen to believe the country is going to the dogs," says Hunter, who describes his politics as liberal Democrat. "My mood is somewhat gloomy, and since drugs and crime I feel are the major problems in America today, and since I happen to be lucky enough to be writing about crime, I can say something about it, I hope." So there we are. That's what's on his mind at the moment. That's more or less everything in the world of McBain. So yeah, a few more things going on there. But we have had a listener question.
Oof.
Yes. I mean, it's from my brother, but it's still a listener question. He does listen. So Gary has asked, and I think it's a good question, really. He says, do we think McBain is still moving with the times? Because wouldn't we have had DNA forensics and surveillance technology be more a part of it at this point? What do you think?
I don't know. I could be wrong. I still think DNA was perhaps not on hand for like local cops necessarily.
I feel like it might have been more for kind of federal cases and the like for the most part at the time.
I would think in the early 90s it would have just been too expensive for the likes of deploying in local matters. But that is complete guess on my part. But because I think if it was part of practice, then I am sure he would have updated the stories, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I think so. From a cursory bit of research, DNA forensics really start to be used in the 80s, but I think Morgan's right. I think it's going to be on a federal level and for these huge high-profile cases, because it was obviously, like anything, it's very expensive until it becomes commonplace.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's there. But what I think perhaps is the issue here is it's not so much about him not moving with the time and reflecting that stuff, but we've not had much lab stuff at all, have we, recently?
That is also true. No. There's not been much looking at that kind of forensic process, so I guess, we don't really know whether he's moving with the times or not in that respect.
Yeah, he seems to be focusing much more on the legal aspect of policing rather than the laboratory aspect of policing, and I think that's telling in that we've got new characters like Nellie Brand coming in as a district attorney, and we're seeing much, much less of Sam Grossman.
Yeah, that's true.
In fact, we're barely going to see him anymore, to be honest, which is a shame.
It is.
But yeah, I think he's just changed his focus slightly onto legal aspects rather than forensic stuff. So, but I don't know. We'll see what happens in the next few books. I think DNA stuff definitely comes up.
With his Matthew Hope books as well, it was clearly something that was interesting him more, wasn't it?
Yes.
The legal aspect.
Well, talking about legal aspects, let's get on to Kiss then, which, like I say, comes out in 1992. I'm not going to go far into the dedication because it's dedicated to his then wife, Mary Van, although I don't understand the phrase, who worked so very hard for it. I don't really know what that means. He'd been married to Mary Van Finley, née Hughes, since 1973. He was stepfather to her daughter, Amanda. But we're only a couple of years away in the Hunter story from him leaving her and meeting Jajika. So quite what that dedication means, I don't know.
It's an odd one, isn't it?
Yeah. Right. Kiss, then. This was my first time reading it. Was it first time for anyone else?
No.
It was for me, yes.
Ah, okay then. So we're both new to it. I suppose right at the top of this one, this is a real one where we've got to go spoilers ahoy, because there's no way we can talk about this without spoiling stuff. There's major twists. There's a lot of character continuity stuff. So if you haven't read it, really do stop this, go and read it, then come back.
Yeah, we're going to ruin it for you.
Yeah, that's the plan. That's the basis of this podcast, is let's ruin some books for people. Well, Steve-O, I know I always ask you if what you think of this stuff, and you always say you don't remember the book from the first read.
I couldn't remember it, apart from the big twist at the end, which I only remembered pretty much as I was reading it. I kind of knew there was one, and then I thought, I never really stopped to think what it was, and I suppose if I would have done, I would have come... A bit of a strange title, isn't it? Do you not think? I thought...
Yeah, I don't think it's not got as many opportunities to
really mean anything. I don't know.
Yeah, just to use the word in a different way. It just has lots of people saying kiss.
Yeah. Yeah, all a bit of a strange title, but yeah.
It sadly doesn't contain anything at all to do with the band Kiss. I kept hoping, but not a sausage. Not a slight mention of Gene Simmons anywhere.
No, and this is a book that does contain references to Frank Sinatra and NWA.
Yeah, together at last.
Yeah, you could have had them singing a...
Yeah, I wonder if NWA ever sampled a Sinatra record. I could probably find out.
I don't know of one, but you never know.
They're very layered, these things. You don't always spot them.
That's true.
But I was going to say, so there's a reference to a song sung by Sinatra called Kiss in this book, but... I don't know masses about Frank Sinatra, but I did check it out because there's no copyright thing in the front saying these lyrics are from a song. So I think McBain's just made it up.
Right.
So yeah, there's a Sinatra song called Kiss Me Again, but the lyrics quoted in this book are not that. So I think perhaps maybe he asked to use the lyrics for permission and was probably told it would cost too much or something, so he's had to make it up.
Could be.
That would be my guess anyway.
Fair dues.
But it does mean... I do know that the fake Sinatra song crops up again in future books as well. Yeah. So, go on then, Steve. Can you give us a quick summary of the story then?
I can, yes. Well, I suppose it's a lot more straightforward than many entries we've had recently, in that it's essentially two stories running in parallel. There is an investigation into an attempted murder of the wife of a stockbroker. I think he is, isn't he? A rich stockbroker, and somebody's trying to murder his wife, or so she thinks. He's not so sure. And so there's that, and that is the principal story. And then running in parallel to that is the trial of one of the men accused of murdering Carella's father. The other murderer was he killed in the siege in the last one? Yeah. So this is his partner. So you've got quite interesting courtroom drama, essentially, that is kind of alternately plays out with the main story, and that is it. More often than not, in quite a few of the recent ones, he's had kind of 3 or 4 or 5 plates spinning in these books, hasn't he? Yeah. Some to better effect than others, really. But this one seems to be slightly more stripped back and, better for it, I would say, actually. I've very much enjoyed it.
Yeah. How did you find it then, Morgan, coming to it afresh?
I agree with Steve-O that the sort of relative simplicity of the structure does benefit it for me. I did enjoy both strands. Didn't see the final twist coming, but then I'm not a person who kind of like spends these novels trying to figure out what twists might be coming up. I quite enjoy just going along with it and being surprised. Yeah. But yeah, I did enjoy it. I think the courtroom drama angle is a bit of a different thing that we don't tend to get in these. And yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I agree. I think the courtroom stuff is brilliantly done, I will say. And I have read The Paper Dragon, the Evan Hunter book, The Paper Dragon, which is all based around a huge court case. And that's a big book, that one. And yet that kept me riveted. And so he's got the skills of doing this courtroom reporting type storytelling. And it's at play in this, which is great. And also because you care about Carella, you care about his family. It's an interesting strand in the book to be in there, that we've never had this sort of continuity of tale across books in the way that this goes. So yeah, I think Courtroom's great.
Yeah, it plays to its strengths with dialogue, doesn't it? The courtroom bits, because that's essentially what it is, isn't it? Just long passages of dialogue with the cross-examination and the courtroom mechanics. Yeah, so that very well, and is to say it's just that kind of essentially those two stories. It's a fairly meaty-sized book, and you felt he did justice to like the main plot as well. With the attempted murder, and then which has elements of kind of organised crime. There's some bloke who's supposedly a private investigator that we ultimately learn's got like underworld connections, and so that was all quite interesting as well.
Yeah, and we get plenty of Ollie Weeks thrown in there as well for good measure.
Yeah, well, yeah, he doesn't dominate like he does in some of the books. It seems to have made him a bit nastier in this one, and I seem to remember it. Yeah, he's kind of like a bit more of a jovial kind of buffoon in like some entries, certainly, isn't he? But this one, he's like awful.
It almost seems like McBain feels like he's made him too sympathetic in previous entries, so he's sort of just making sure that we do remember that he's kind of pretty vile as well.
Yeah.
This time, just to ramping up the bigotry.
Maybe he's making him vile because he does, certainly in the later books, doesn't he? He undergoes a bit of an epiphany. Well, not an epiphany, but you know what I mean. His character kind of starts turning good, doesn't he?
On a bit of a road to redemption, isn't he? So I think that the worse he makes him to start with, the more impactful that change is, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting in this one that they have him sort of talking to Parker, almost like he's encouraging Parker to be worse than he is, and he's bad enough.
Yeah. But Parker's just a lazy slob, really, isn't he? Rather than, not quite.
Rather than an outright bigot, but certainly Ollie Weeks is not a good influence on him.
No.
But he's sort of the way he portrays it, like Parker's. It's like when you meet a kid at school and it's like you're in awe of them because they seem like they've got it sorted or something, or they have a particular attitude, and they're usually dickheads because most kids are. But it's interesting. It is interesting. But Parker again in this book, who does nothing in this book except at one point, in a really good scene in one of the chapters, basically solves the entire thing.
Well, that's the thing with Parker. He does do that sometimes, doesn't he? He just a bit of a one-liner that just puts them on the right track to solving the case.
As long as he doesn't actually have to get up and do it himself.
As long as he doesn't have to do it. Yeah, he's not bothered, is he?
As lazy and burnt out and jaded as he might be, he does occasionally actually have some pretty smart ideas.
And in fact, the scene I'm talking about there it's the start of chapter 7, and it's basically, it's a common thing that happens in the book. It's where all the detectives are brought into Lieutenant Burns' office, and they have a chat about the case that's ongoing, that's troubling them. But it's brilliantly done in this book because it's like a soft reboot, or it's like a really good introduction to the characters that you're going to be with if you've never read the books before, despite the fact that actually it's telling an ongoing story in the court case that's come from a book before it. It's a brilliant chapter or a scene in a chapter even, not a whole chapter, where he just really does these quick sketches of Kling and Hawes and Parker and Arthur Brown and Bob O'Brien and Corella and Meyer, and does it so well. You could give that to anyone and those people would have an idea about the characters they're going to be with if they were going to go back and read the old ones or carry on reading from there on. So that's I think another good point in this book as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And another thing you get in this as well, I think, which he does occasionally, but maybe not as much as he does in this, is see it from the criminal's perspective, don't you? There's a lot of scenes that totally exclude the police, and he ultimately uses that as a very clever means of springing the surprise on you at the end, because you think you know everything that's going to play out, and you don't really question it, and then you realise he's purposely been silent with kind of one of the characters, really. But they're very good as well, and you kind of, because there's like two baddies in this, isn't there? There's one being a professional and one being just an odious, awful person.
Yeah.
And so it's quite interesting seeing them interact as well, I thought. Not wishing to give away too much.
We're going to have to.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting set of characters who you're never going to particularly like in the sort of main investigatory story. And like you say, he puts you with the characters who tell you what's going to happen. And normally I'd hate that, but actually, when you get to the end and you get the twist, it's like it's worked really, really well in this book.
Yeah, definitely.
I've got I spotted a few interesting references in the book as well. I don't know if you guys found anything particularly noticeable.
Talks about his birthday again, doesn't he? I think he does that every single book at the moment.
Birth date of great men. That's always in there. And he also goes to the Golden Lion restaurant, which he has. Yes. Or he doesn't go. Corella goes to the Golden Lion restaurant, which was previously in Sadie when she died.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's a
nice throwback.
Yeah, but yeah.
What else have we got from the past? I don't know that there's massive stuff from the past.
I thought an interesting new character was the chief of detectives, who I don't think he's cropped up before, has he?
No, indeed, and I think that's a part of a reflection of the changing of the guard in the NYPD as well. So I've mentioned before that a couple of books ago, I think, that the police commissioner of the early 90s was Richard J. Condon, Dick Condon, who was McBain's friend. Used to be his sort of guide to the police of New York, and he became police commissioner, but only for a short while. So he was only in office until January 1990. So the guy who became police commissioner when this book was written was a guy called Lee Patrick Brown, who had come from Houston, and it was a black man in the role. And that's reflected in the book because they're talking about how he's appointed a white chief of detectives.
Yeah.
So we have a scene at the start where Parker and Ollie Weeks are moaning about the new commissioner, and then later on we meet this new chief of detectives who's been brought in there.
Yeah, he was just like a bit of a grizzled career detective kind of guy, isn't he? Probably a New Yorker or a equivalent New Yorker through and through, isn't he?
Yeah. So I think that's again reflecting real world changes there. I'll be interested to see, because obviously a police commissioner is appointed by the mayor of New York, I believe, who at the time was a guy called David Dinkins, who lost to Rudy Giuliani in 1993. So I'll be interested to see whether something happens with the mayor in Isola in the next couple of books.
Maybe,
yeah. Rudy Giuliani before he went completely mad?
Yep. Yeah. Strange, isn't it? What happens to some folk?
Yeah.
So no, it was quite a lot of interesting, like little asides, real world commentary in here. Yeah, that was good.
I mean, my favourite thing in here is there's a point where they talk about someone reading The Guardian.
Oh yeah, that's quite a funny bit, isn't it? Because does he do a review or something?
Well, essentially what happens is the guy who is the lawyer for the Corella family, who is Henry Lowell, who will be back in future books, is talking about, because he keeps going on about having this semi-British accent he's putting on the airs, and he's spending time in London, and he read this article in The Guardian, and do forgive my use of the language, but it's the title of the article, of Wops and Cops. Now, that is a real article about Ed McBain, and I've talked about it before, because it's quite a good article for an interview with McBain. But clearly it's been playing on McBain's mind for the last 2 years. So it came in the 21st of August, 1990, this article came out in The Guardian. It's been playing on McBain's mind because he's gone and he's done this interview, and then they've stuck this name of Wops and Cops on it. And McBain's saying in the book, he's giving the characters the job of saying he didn't realise quite how offensive that was. Why would this guy have put that on there? And to be honest, he's completely right. I can't stand the title of that article. 1990, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think you get the impression that if McBain was ever to meet that journalist again, he'd probably punch him in the face.
Yeah, it's a bit strange coming from a liberal, left-leaning newspaper as well, The Guardian.
Yeah.
Very odd. Yeah, but I thought that was... a bit of a classic McBain-ism, wasn't it? Putting a real world, something that he's got a bit of a beef with, and just throwing it into a scene. And
I think as a result, there's a few British references scattered throughout.
Yeah, I've always thought, actually, that he clearly knew there must have been a very big readership in the UK, because there always seems to be plenty of British references that he throws in there, like fairly regularly, really.
Yeah, there's a scene where they're talking about Guy Fawkes Day for some reason.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's very funny as well. Yeah,
so that's one, and then obviously the Golden Lion's supposed to be like a British themed restaurant, isn't it? Some weird stuff like that in there. Just a few different things where he keeps talking about Britain. Yeah. Well, my question is: Did anyone spot the name of the person who is actually Ollie Weeks' partner, which I've never heard mentioned before?
Well,
and this may be the only mention of the cop who's supposed to be his actual partner, his detective partner.
I can't remember it, but go on, fire away.
It's Detective Second Grade Jasper Loop.
Jasper Loop, yeah.
That's a great name.
That's an excellent name, yeah.
We need a Jasper Loop spin-off series.
I was just thinking, that'd be excellent.
Loop and Weeks. No, it's as usual. It's packed with stuff, and then we've got this stuff about Corella and the Mafia, which is, like I said at the start, is something new, in that Corella goes to get a favour from a Don.
Yes, somebody who owes him a favour, doesn't he? He wants some information about this private investigator who's supposedly keeping an eye out on the woman who's subject to these murderous attempts.
And then it has, obviously, it's an excuse to do the Corella is a super cop in the sense of his moral duty in that he won't take a bribe, which I just thought was interesting. Right, okay, what else have we got here? Oh, we have another appearance of the preacher at one point, briefly. And we have a good Hill Street Blues reference as well, if anyone spotted it.
Which was that?
Murchison at one point saying to them, "Be careful out there."
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then McBain talking about life imitating art as well.
I assumed that was a Hill Street Blues thing. I've never actually seen Hill Street Blues, so I wasn't 100% sure, but that was what I was guessing it was.
Oh, yes, it definitely is, yeah. It says here, he'd been watching too many television reruns, life imitating art, though most often art imitated life, and occasionally art imitated art, all too successfully.
Yes.
He's not going to let it go. So, I mean, yeah, there's all sorts going on. There's reference to a thing called Sunday in the Park with George, which is a Sondheim musical I've never heard of. Ever heard of that one, Morgan?
The title rings a bell, but I don't really know anything about it at all, I must admit.
No, I'd never heard that one at all. And we have a description of the city at one point where saying about how the rivers meet and where the seawall is, which doesn't make any geographical sense whatsoever if you follow what we're supposed to think the city is like, because the rivers wouldn't meet where the sea is, and, anyway, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, do we discuss the twist at the end?
I don't know. Perhaps we don't really need to. I don't know.
Well, maybe not.
Would be a shame to spoil it for anybody, but yeah, it's quite funny because like one of the characters, like the lady who's subject to the murderous attempts, you can't quite understand how on earth she can be that daft to be taken in by this fella.
Yeah,
and yet she's clearly got some plans of her own, which you only find out at the very end.
I suppose the other, well, it's not a twist at the end, but the other thing you've got to deal with is the court case outcome, which is, it's an interesting thing. Well, I mean, how did you find that, Morgan, that, we've gone through this and we're rooting for Corella. It seems like we've had this interesting court case and then basically the guy's acquitted.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, would it have been sort of dramatically satisfying if we'd gone through all the court case and then he'd just been found guilty? I don't know. Maybe it's better for the ongoing drama that he is acquitted.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It is quite a tense sort of subplot that all the way through, because although the lawyer is doing a solid job, that there are a few kind of solid bits of undermining kind of arguments from the defence, and it is quite a stomach churner. And then it's a real kick in the teeth, isn't it?
Yeah. So implications for years to come, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a happy ending by any means for anyone really in this at all.
Yeah, sort of main case not quite sort of wrapped up completely to their full satisfaction. They wrap it up to some extent.
Yeah, it burns itself out a little bit, doesn't it? Someone's lit a fuse, it all burns up, and that's how it ends.
Yeah.
They're left picking up the pieces as much as anything. Although I will say there's a fantastic sequence. There's one action sequence in this book, which is where Corella and Maya go for...
it's brilliant.
Breaking into the apartment. They've got a no-knock order to try and get this guy, which is really good. So it's not on the scale of the siege from the book before, but it's a really good bit of them in the dark, shooting and listening and waiting.
Yeah,
counting bullets.
Yeah, all that stuff.
That's great. Yeah, just the psychology of it and the fake order, the charge, and great stuff.
It's really, really good. So I think we better get towards summing up for this one then. And I've got a couple of contemporary reviews. I found quite a few, but I'm not going to read them all out because they're generally of the same opinion. What have we got? We've got Marilyn Stasio in the New York Times she's saying, along with his bleak sermon on the collapse of urban civilization, the author delivers the rest of the goods: wired action scenes, dialogue that breathes, characters with heart, and characters who eat those hearts, and glints of unforgiving humour. And this time, besides the usual mastery display of police procedures, there is also the grim pleasure of watching the criminal court at work. Call it Isola or call it hell, Ed McBain owns this turf. So that's probably one of the best reviews he's had for ages, that little paragraph.
Yeah.
We've got Thomas Morowitz in the Washington Post. McBain practices the science rather than the art of holding our attention. While the telling flaunts its immediacy and cleverness, it does so at the cost of resonance. That's not quite so good.
I don't really know what that means either. I don't know if it means anything.
Yeah. Well, the problem with this review is he then compares it to another book he's reviewed in the same article, which doesn't help you when you take it in isolation. So what's the point? That doesn't help the reader.
No.
Anyway, what else have we got? We've got Michael Painter in the Irish Times, he references particularly the scene where they're in the office, in Burns' office. And we've got, it is an awesome achievement on McBain's part to have kept the series so vital and vivid for so long. There have been highs and lows, but generally a consistency of intent has overcome all and every reservation. Ask the fans, who are legion.
Indeed.
And Christopher Wordsworth in The Observer has said, the city's naked underbelly, disenchanted venal cops, a nasty barstool seduction, a stakeout, a terrific final twist. Familiarity will never breed anything but growing admiration in McBain's case. Generally, very, very good reviews. So, yeah. Actually, there's an interesting one there that we haven't really talked about. Fortunately, it's not absent, but there's not as much dirty, porny sex in this one.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
There's a little bit. But not quite. It's
been all too common recently.
Yeah, the last three particularly, there's been a lot of that, and it's definitely reined in this time, which is most welcome.
Yeah. Okay, then. Well, I think I'll come to you then, Morgan, for your summary and score.
I think it's a really strong entry in the series. Simplifies things a little bit, gets rid of some of the things we've not liked from the last few books. The sort of the dark tone is still there, but it feels like it's playing a lot more to McBain's strengths, whilst also adding some new things like the courtroom drama, which we've not seen before, but which is a really welcome addition. I think it's an excellent entry into the series, and I am going to go in with a strong score of 84 police shields.
84, excellent. Okay. Well, we'll have a first-time reader, repeat reader, first-time reader sandwich. So, Steve-O, you can go next.
I would concur with that. I think, very strong entry. Very much enjoyed it. All the better for being a bit more straightforward. Moments of drama and excitement, and quite like the focus on the criminal and their kind of motives, and both of them as well. I think I would go 85 police shields. I think it's a bit of a 8.5 out of 10, definitely kind of level, really.
Yeah, well, I concur pretty much with the pair of you as well. I'm hard pressed to think what I would need in it to make it a perfect McBain, a perfect 87th Precinct. I don't know what you could add to it. I don't think it is perfect. I think it's very, very good.
I think, if you were being really fussy, then, and you wanted a bit of everything, then aside from the court drama, maybe not too much happens to the actual cops in this in terms of drama in their lives. Maybe it's lacking a little. Maybe lacking a bit of that, and maybe the crime itself, whilst it's very engaging, isn't perhaps as flamboyant as some of like the like the Deaf Man kind of ones, which they're so ridiculous they kind of just pull you in a little bit more, don't they, just because they're just so outlandish that they've got a certain appeal, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
So that's perhaps in order to make it an absolute, but even at 85, you're very near the very high scoring.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, the only thing I'd like perhaps out of that, like you say, is a bit more of the other cops interacting. But, there's so much in it. And I'll tell you what, of course, what it does as well. And I think perhaps the thing we haven't really mentioned is it is a very interesting examination still, again, of issues of race in the city. And even though it's not involved necessarily in the main investigation plot, it's there all through the court case. It's there with Ollie Weeks. It's all there. It's still something that McBain's addressing at a time where clearly it's in a country where we've had these riots and all sorts going on. It's inescapable, and it's an interesting way to address it through the courtroom drama as well. Mm-hmm. God, I really like the courtroom drama, and I really like The Paper Dragon, and I'm terrified now that I'm going to have to start reading books that are just courtroom dramas.
We'll have
I'll start reading John Grisham stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was just trying to remind myself the name of the, But you can see why novels like John Grisham's and whatnot make like really watchable films, don't they? They just lend themselves to drama and kind of suspenseful.
It's almost like watching sport, isn't it? Because it's all about the push and pull and will this quite make it? Oh, are they going to say the right thing? How are you going to be? How are we going to feel when we leave this scene?
Yeah, exactly. You in the same way of sport, you've got two very skilled kind of lawyers, and it all turns on one or two phrases, doesn't it, or one or two moments, and when it starts in the same way, any sports match or game. You're just not quite sure how it's going to pan out, and
you have the heart in the mouth.
Yeah, and it can defy logic quite frequently as well.
Especially while you're waiting for the verdict to be returned.
Yeah.
But anyway, that means, just to continue the upward trend, I'm going to give it 86 police shields, which gives us a very simple score of 85. No rounding required. So there we go. That does put it up in the sort of top echelons, I think.
Yeah, I've just been looking at the Kenneth graph here. We've had, with the exception of Tricks, we've had some fairly, in the scheme of things, low scorers ever since Ice, really.
Yeah. Like Tricks has been a standout recently.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we've had 6 books in a row, and only one of those has scored in the top half, I would say. So this is a bit of a bounce back.
Despite the fact that it's got an ongoing court case story in it, it is one where I'd say you could give this to a new reader and they'd enjoy it as well.
Yeah.
So there's that as well.
Huh.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which is not something we've been able to say about some of the recent ones.
Smashing stuff. Okay, well, we'll round off here and be back with the next book in the series, which is Mischief. That'll be our next episode. We'll also be back for our bonus episode with our look at some silly things from 1992 and the book covers of the original editions of this. But until then, I'm going to say goodbye, and so is Steve-O.
Goodbye.
And so is Morgan.
Fairly well.